The sales clerk just slammed the door in a homeless man's face, not knowing he owned the entire company. What happened next changed everything. That moment when everything you thought was solid just crumbles in front of you. The CEO, disguised to test his rude sales staff, walked into his own luxury car dealership, looking like he hadn't showered in weeks. And what his employees did shocked him to the core. This story from 1995 will make you rethink how you treat every single person who walks through your door. Richard Callaway built premium motors from absolutely nothing. Started in a tiny garage in Detroit back in 1978, working 16-hour days, sleeping on a cot next to the cars he was fixing. By 1995, his dealership chain had grown to 12 locations across the Midwest, specializing in high-end European vehicles. Mercedes, BMW, Jaguar, the kind of cars that screamed success. But Richard never forgot where he came from. His father was a factory worker who got laid off during the recession. His mother cleaned houses to keep food on the table. Richard knew what struggle looked like, what desperation felt like, and that's exactly why he decided to run this test. It was a Tuesday morning in September when Richard walked into his flagship dealership in downtown Chicago. But he didn't walk in as CEO Richard Callaway in his tailored suit and Italian leather shoes. No, he walked in as a man the world had forgotten, torn jeans with holes in the knees, a stained jacket that smelled like cigarettes and motor oil, unwashed hair hidden under a dirty baseball cap, shoes held together with duct tape. He looked like someone who had been living on the streets for months, because that was exactly the point. Richard wanted to see how his staff treated people when there was absolutely nothing to gain from being kind. The dealership floor was pristine. Marble tiles so clean you could see your reflection, rows of luxury vehicles under bright spotlights, each one worth more than most people made in a year. The air smelled like leather and expensive cologne. Richard pushed through the glass doors, and immediately he felt the eyes on him. 3 sales associates stood near the reception desk. Margaret, who had been with the company for 8 years. Todd, a hotshot young guy who always bragged about his commission checks. And Jennifer, fresh out of college, barely 3 months on the job. Margaret saw him first, her face twisted like she had just bitten into something rotten. She nudged Todd with her elbow and whispered something Richard couldn't quite hear, but he saw them both laugh. Jennifer looked uncomfortable, shifting her weight from one foot to the other, but she didn't say anything. Richard shuffled forward, playing his role perfectly. He scratched his beard and looked around at the cars with genuine interest, running his hand along the hood of a silver Mercedes S-Class. Todd approached, but not with the friendly smile he usually gave to customers. His arms were crossed, his jaw tight. "Hey, buddy, I think you got the wrong place." His voice was cold, dismissive. Richard looked up at him, staying in character. "I was just looking at the cars. Real beautiful machines you got here." Todd scoffed. "Yeah, well, looking is free, but these cars aren't. Maybe try the bus station down the street if you need somewhere warm to hang out." Margaret walked over, her heels clicking sharply against the marble. "Sir, we don't serve beggars here. This is a luxury dealership, not a homeless shelter. I'm going to have to ask you to leave before I call security." Richard felt something twist in his chest. These were his employees, people he paid well, people he trusted to represent his company, and this is how they treated someone they perceived as beneath them. He pressed forward with the test. "I've got money," he said quietly, reaching into his jacket pocket. He pulled out a wrinkled $20 bill. "I've been saving up. Just wanted to see what kind of car I could get someday." Todd actually laughed out loud. $20? Man, you can't even afford the air freshener in these cars. Stop wasting our time and get out." Margaret was already pulling out her phone. "I'm calling security right now. We don't need your kind bringing down the atmosphere in here. Our real customers don't want to walk in and see this." She gestured at Richard like he was garbage on the sidewalk. But then Jennifer stepped forward. Her voice was shaky but determined. "Wait, Margaret, he's not bothering anyone. He just wants to look at the cars." Margaret spun on her, eyes flashing. "Excuse me, are you seriously defending this? Jennifer, you need to learn how business works. We cater to clients who can actually afford our inventory, not street people who wandered in off the sidewalk." Todd jumped in, smirking at Jennifer. "Yeah, rookie mistake. You'll learn soon enough that time is money in this business. Why waste it on someone who couldn't buy a bicycle, let alone a luxury car?" Richard watched Jennifer's face. She looked scared, like she might back down any second. But then something shifted in her expression. She turned to Richard, and for the first time that morning, someone looked at him like he was actually human. "Sir, would you like some water? Maybe you'd like to sit down for a minute." Margaret's voice rose sharply. "Jennifer, what are you doing? I swear if you don't stop this right now." That's when Richard decided the test had gone far enough. He straightened up, pulling off the dirty baseball cap. He met Margaret's eyes directly, and he saw the exact moment she recognized him. The color drained from her face like someone had pulled a plug. Todd's smirk vanished. His mouth actually fell open. The entire showroom went silent except for the quiet jazz music playing through the speakers. "Mr. Calloway!" Margaret's voice came out as barely a whisper. Richard didn't smile. His voice was calm but carried the weight of disappointment. 8 years, Margaret. 8 years you've worked for me. And this is how you treat people? Todd, I hired you because you said you understood that every customer deserves respect, that every person who walks through that door is an opportunity to represent what this company stands for. He turned to look at both of them. "We don't serve beggars here." "Those were your words, Margaret. Let me tell you what we actually don't serve. We don't serve cruelty. We don't serve judgment. We don't serve people who think someone's worth is determined by their bank account or the clothes on their back." Margaret's hands were shaking. "Mr. Calloway, I'm so sorry. I didn't know it was you. I would never—" Richard cut her off. "You wouldn't treat me like that because I'm your boss, but you had no problem treating a stranger that way. That's exactly the problem." He looked at Todd. "You laughed at a man for having $20 and a dream. You know how much money I had when I started this company? Less than that. I had $12 and a toolbox I borrowed from my neighbor." The silence was suffocating. Richard could see other staff members had gathered at the edges of the showroom watching. He raised his voice slightly so everyone could hear. "I built this company on a simple principle. Every person deserves dignity. Every person deserves to be treated with basic human respect, regardless of what they look like or what's in their wallet. I thought I had made that clear. Apparently, I was wrong." He turned to Jennifer, and his expression softened just slightly. "You were the only one who saw a person instead of a problem, the only one who offered basic kindness. That tells me something important about character." Back to Margaret and Todd. "Both of you, my office. Now. We're going to have a very long conversation about whether you still belong in this organization. Let me ask you something. Have you ever judged someone based on how they looked, only to find out you were completely wrong? Drop your story in the comments. I read every single one." Margaret tried again, words tumbling out desperately. "Please, Mr. Calloway, I have a mortgage. I have bills. I made a mistake." Richard held up his hand. "A mistake is forgetting to return a phone call. A mistake is getting someone's name wrong. What you did was a choice. You chose to be cruel. You chose to humiliate someone you thought couldn't fight back. That's not a mistake. That's a character flaw." Over the next hour, Richard sat in his office with Margaret and Todd separately. Margaret cried, apologized, made promises about changing. Todd tried to justify it, saying he was just trying to protect the company's image, that homeless people hanging around would drive away real customers. That made it worse. Richard terminated both of them on the spot. 8 years of employment didn't matter when the core values were violated. Hitting sales targets didn't matter when basic humanity was missing. Jennifer was promoted to senior sales associate that same day with a significant raise. Richard also announced a new company-wide policy. Every month, Premium Motors would host a community day where anyone, regardless of their financial situation, could come in, look at the cars, ask questions, and be treated with the same respect as a customer buying the most expensive vehicle on the lot. Any employee caught treating someone poorly based on appearance would be immediately terminated, no exceptions. But the story doesn't end there. 3 weeks later, a man walked into the dealership. Clean-cut, well-dressed, carrying himself with quiet confidence. He asked specifically for Jennifer. Turned out he was a tech entrepreneur who had just sold his startup for $18 million. He told Jennifer he had been in the area that day in September, had seen the whole interaction through the dealership windows. He had watched her stand up to her co-workers to defend a stranger. That kind of character was rare, he said. He bought 4 cars that day. 2 for himself, 2 as gifts for his parents, and he insisted Jennifer handle the entire transaction. The story spread. Local news picked it up. CEO disguised to test his rude sales staff became a headline that ran in newspapers across the Midwest. Richard gave interviews, talking about the importance of treating every human being with dignity. Premium Motors saw a surge in business. People wanted to support a company that stood for something beyond profit. But more importantly, the culture inside the company shifted. Employees started treating everyone better because they knew they were being held to a higher standard. They knew Richard wasn't just talking about values in some corporate manual. He was willing to disguise himself as homeless, walk into his own company, and fire long-time employees who violated those principles. Richard never regretted his decision. Years later, he would say that test was one of the most important things he ever did as a leader, because it revealed the truth. Not the version of people they presented to their boss, but who they really were when they thought no one important was watching. And that, Richard believed, was when you truly saw someone's character. If this story moved you, if it made you think differently about how we treat people, hit that subscribe button right now. We share powerful true stories like this every single week, stories that challenge you to be better, to see the world differently. Subscribe and join this community. Seriously, click it right now. You won't regret it. Margaret never worked in sales again. Last anyone heard, she was working in administrative support at a small insurance company. Todd bounced around different dealerships for a few years before leaving the industry entirely. Jennifer went on to become one of the top-performing sales professionals in the entire Premium Motors organization. Within 5 years, Richard promoted her to general manager of the flagship location, the same dealership where she had been a nervous rookie, scared to stand up to her colleagues, but did it anyway because it was the right thing to do. Richard Calloway continued running Premium Motors until he retired in 2010, selling the company to a larger automotive group, but staying on as a consultant to ensure the values he built didn't get lost in the transition. He established a scholarship fund for young people from low-income backgrounds who wanted to pursue careers in business. The application didn't ask for test scores or grades. It asked one question. Tell us about a time you stood up for someone when it was difficult to do so. The $20 bill Richard had pulled out during his test, he framed it and hung it in his office. Under it, a small plaque read, "Never forget where you came from. Never look down on where someone else might be." Every new employee at Premium Motors was brought into that office on their first day and told the story. Not as a legend or a company myth, but as a reminder of what happens when you choose cruelty over kindness, when you judge a book by its cover, when you forget that every single person you meet is fighting a battle you know nothing about. That's the real lesson here. We don't serve beggars. Those 4 words revealed everything wrong with how Margaret and Todd saw the world. They had divided humanity into categories, people who mattered and people who didn't. People worth their time and people who were just obstacles. And when you operate from that mindset, you lose something essential. You lose your humanity. You lose the ability to see the reflection of yourself in a stranger's eyes. You lose the understanding that circumstances change, that luck runs out, that any of us could end up on the other side of that glass door looking in. Richard's test wasn't about catching people doing wrong. It was about finding out who would do right when there was no reward for it. Jennifer didn't know Richard was the CEO. She gained nothing from offering water to a homeless man. She actually risked her job by going against her senior colleagues. But she did it anyway. That's character. That's the kind of person Richard wanted representing his company. That's the kind of person who changes the world one small act of kindness at a time. So the next time you see someone who looks down on their luck, someone who doesn't fit your idea of important or valuable, remember this story. Remember that the CEO might be disguised as a beggar. Remember that the person you dismiss today might be the person who could change your life tomorrow. Remember that kindness costs nothing but means everything. And remember that how you treat people when you think no one important is watching reveals exactly who you are.